Okay, now that's what I'm fucking talking about. Hey guys, David here with a new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. review. This one's for the episode called The Past Life, or A Past Life, or just Past Life. And this is what you can consider the mid-season penultimate episode. And to be honest, I think it should have been just the finale, because it really felt like a legitimate finale minus the cliffhanger ending. But every kind of event and twist and turn leading up to that point was huge, and it was huge without being confusing, and I think that's what made this episode such a humongous upswing from the previous two episodes that sadly made me feel like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was losing a little bit of its momentum, a little bit of its tenacity, because it was kind of climbing up its own ass a little bit with all of these time jumps and loops and explanations about time-space continuum, about these people going back and forth, back and forth. It was hurting my brain. With this episode being that we're kind of leading up to the end game of all things, of getting our heroes back to the past so that they can keep things from happening as bad as they do here in this version of the future, it's all about getting our characters within that end game scenario, but by getting them to build the monolith, getting Fitz and Simmons to build a machine to be able to power up the monolith and being able to just warp themselves back just like they were warped back to that place. So that was the external goal, that was the end point to get to. But so many things kind of either got unveiled or just managed to happen en route to this exact climactic ending that again did end in a cliffhanger, but it kind of makes sense considering we only got one episode before we finally break for, I guess you could say, a mid-season break. Let's talk about the big one that we were kind of left hanging with at the end of last week's episode, where apparently Casius had his own seer of sorts that was telling him what was true and what wasn't, or at least that's what he and the Kree were led to believe. The seer was none other than Yo-Yo herself, only this is the alternate version Yo-Yo, not the Yo-Yo that was within Coulson's ranks, because I was thinking to myself, that would be some bullshit if it's Yo-Yo, this Yo-Yo that we know, and pulling a turncoat here, but it would be ballsy. I would give the writer some balls there, but it was actually a version of Yo-Yo that was held against her will, and I was like, okay, yeah, it was a sickly turn, but it wasn't nothing that kind of knocked me on my seat. I don't know, it just didn't pack the emotional punch that I was hoping for it to do, at least until it was revealed that her arms were cut off. I was like, Jesus, you're not fucking around exactly. And also, what doesn't help is that Natalia, I can't remember her last name, but the actress, she is not quite there to pull off a big turn like this. I know it sounds hypercritical and a little harsh, but I just don't think her performance in this episode didn't sell me this turn. It didn't sell me this big reveal, because the way she was talking to herself, she sounded the same way she would talk to like Mac or to another supporting character about something very somber and sentimental. Like it looked like it shook her, whether it be the future her or the present her. So from a storytelling perspective, I understood it and I was like, okay, cool. And that's yet another character that's kind of acknowledging this whole time loop paradox that they found themselves in. So I was like, okay, that's neat. But in terms of delivering that emotional gravita or resonance, it didn't do it for me. And this is the Yo-Yo that was doing all the bidding for Casius, and it's ultimately Casius who uses her to kind of get the wool over Mac's eyes and to kind of pull off his last move off, along with some help of some good old Kree steroids that turns you into like a runner from The Last of Us. And this was actually one of my favorite parts of the episode, because it made Casius, as well as the episode, much more proactive. It kind of took it upon their hands to create an initiative and be like, all right, you know what, enough with sending other folks, enough with sending other people to do my messages or my bidding or my things. I'm doing it. I'm finally fucking doing it. But I need some steroid help. I love that we saw this calm, cool, and collected Casius over the past couple of episodes to start losing his shit and like I said before, show some vulnerability, and it all picked here where I loved how he's like, I'm gonna bash your head with your skull, or whatever the fuck he was saying. And it cracked me up, but in a good way. It didn't seem cheesy, it just seemed like in a way where I'm like, okay, this character has finally broken, and this was the final nail in the coffin for not only his personality, but just the character overall, because by the end of it, we do see the exit of Casius, which is what cemented this episode as being more of the actual climax, and then whatever episode we end up with next week is more, it's going to be more like the epilogue to kind of wrap everything in a nice little bow for this entire storyline before setting us up for what's going to happen next in the latter half of the season. I did think it was a little strange that Mac was the one to deliver the killing blow. It's cool that it was the shotgun axe that we finally saw in action, but in terms of character and character development, I don't understand why Mac was the one chosen to do all of this, but I love that Gemma was somehow involved in the demise of Casius, because it was Gemma, the one that was kind of manipulated and emotionally traumatized by Casius himself. So good job there on the writing. Speaking of the Fitzsimmons dynamic, it didn't exactly affect the plot overall, but I really dug the one scene of Fitz developing some kind of contraption and the people didn't know what was going on, but when the Kree walked in, he activated it. Fucking razor wire just takes out their heads. Jesus Christ, Fitz! And Gemma acknowledges this. This is a dark version. Fitz would not have made this trap if he didn't go through what he did in the framework. And I feel like there's a little nugget there that's going on in Gemma's mind, going like, oh God, is this is the version that I saw Fitz in the framework possible, considering he just made this damn thing and took out Kree by cutting off their heads in a vicious fashion. It was a cool sight to see, and it also kept with the consistency of these characters going through the troubles that they did within past seasons. Now, I love that the writers kind of acknowledged that putting Yo-Yo as the seer for Casius unwillingly would be a little bit of a disservice if she didn't exactly give us some information of her own to not only at least one of our heroes, but more importantly us, the audience, so that we know something that they don't. And she revealed another dark twist within the episode, that Coulson actually is dying. And I love that it wasn't like a secret that has been there for the longest time. It's actually something that literally just happened in this episode when he was infected by the dude with steroids, the very first dude that we saw. And this little speck of a detail then becomes of the time loop that this other version of Yo-Yo is caught within her. And I love it. Besides that, I like that I'm able to keep up with this. This is not something that kind of went over my head like in the past couple of episodes where I was having trouble keeping up and it was very convoluted and it lost me. And from what I can tell, it lost an awful lot of people too who watched the episode. This was a little bit easier to follow, and on top of that, it made for something very uncomfortable with Coulson, where he flat out knocks out Daisy against her will to come back. And that's a very selfish move. That's a very selfish move on Coulson's part, but it's a very effective character dynamic, a character trait that you look at and go, wow, that's flawed as hell, but I want to see the ramifications of this. That's what makes compelling and interesting stories, and that's what makes me go, okay, Coulson, how are you going to get out of this one? And that's something that, like even he puts it, they get past the mission, they save the day, there's always going to be another hurdle to go through. But the best hurdles that keeps us watching TV shows are the ones when characters are faced with hurdles of their own that are internal, much more so than external, much more than being the bad guy. There's always something inside that's constantly torturing them. And so Coulson making this decision here versus Quake's refusal to want to go, trying to prevent a calamity from happening, that's something that is really juicy. That's something awesome. And of course, we can, him being infected and I guess subsequently dying slowly is going to be the main motive as to why he pulled up this decision. But I gotta be honest, no offense to Coulson or even his respective actor Clark Gray here, I'm much more interested in how he's going to be able to weasel himself out of this decision rather than him actually dying. Because, mark my words, but this little seed of him potentially dying could go either way, to be completely honest. Because considering we're in the 5th season and ratings are substantial but they're not exactly great, I would not be surprised if this is their ace in the hole to say, okay, if we get greenlit for season 6, he'll be saved. If, however, ABC says, yeah, we got to go with the ending of this show being here at season 5, then pulling the trigger on Coulson would be the way to go. Now, whether or not they're going to tackle this big decision that Coulson made in this next episode, or we're going to have to wait until they come back in March, we'll find out, I guess, next week. But what we do know is that the explosion gives us our cliffhanger ending, whether or not our heroes managed to go back. My bet is that they did, but the people that we know didn't go back and didn't meet their demise besides Casius would be both Enoch and Deke. And I felt bad for Enoch more so than Deke, because Deke was trying to do a heroic thing here, and it was just so unearned. Even down to the last episode that he's in, he's still bickering, he's still bitching around, and I just did not care. He was still annoying me, and I feel like this is probably one of the characters amongst the entire pantheon of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. seasons in which a character just did not work out. A character did not do what the writers probably intended. Maybe it was on the actors partaking into the character, or maybe they weren't able to write him very well into the overall arc of the story, but Deke just did not work out. And even when he gave his life in order to be able to get our heroes back, assuming they made it back, it just didn't pan out very well. Like I said, I feel much more bad for an inanimate character like Enoch, who was very compelling and charismatic, more so than he was. So better luck next time, S.H.I.E.L.D. writers. But honestly, I think that's my only major complaint about the episode, because the rest of it was able to get back that momentum that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was kind of lacking within the past couple of episodes. That got me for a scare. That S.H.I.E.L.D. was going down those trappings that I was scared that it was going into. And I'm glad to see that we're getting some significant redeeming qualities within this episode. And I didn't even mention, once again, the visual effects that are not only top-notch, but that scene of Flint putting on his Iron Man helmet and using the rocks, really cool visual. And I'm glad to see that they're putting much more work and effort, not only into the technical aspects of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but the story starting to come back around, and it's got me looking forward to the next episode. So I'm going to be giving Past Life a low 8 out of 10. It's definitely a significant improvement over the past couple of episodes, but it still has a little bit ways to go, and that's what I'm expecting out of the mid-season finale next week. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Don't forget to like and share this video to support it, and of course subscribe to stay tuned for that mid-season finale of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. next week when it does in fact go up. Until next time, guys, see you all later. Let's make the cheesy and ridiculous moments of this game, such as that one, or one towards the end where two characters are kissing and one of them is wearing a fucking mask.
Oh, yeah. Thanks again.
No problem. Grab hold of a rogue balloon anytime. Rescuing demons is my specialty.
Go get him, Tiger.
Spider-Man's the worst!